It's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Happy Friday. Happy November. Crazy. Man, that's nuts. It's November. Jeez. We're halfway through the football season, 8 games into it, week 9 coming up. We're going to be past the halfway point after this Sunday, which is really just sad. So I don't really think that I want to talk about it. I want to talk about Colts, Vikings, and just looking at this game. Big game, obviously, for the Colts. Big game for the Vikings as well. The Colts looking to get over 500. The Vikings are looking to avoid 3 straight losses. And in terms of the injury report, guys that are hurt, it doesn't really seem like there's an advantage one way or the other. Sure, the Vikings lost their left tackle for the year, but they made that trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars to bring in, I don't even remember his name. So they're going to be fine at that spot. I obviously talked about this game for a bit yesterday. And the big thing is, like, the Vikings are just going to blitz. Like, that is still the thing that I am most interested in seeing, how the Colts look to combat it, right? Like, this team blitzes, the Vikings do. They blitz more than any other team in the NFL. They've blitzed on 41% of their opponents' dropbacks this season. And it's not even just about the fact that they blitz, it's that they get home when they blitz. Okay, they lead the NFL in pressures. They're 4th in sacks. They're 3rd in knockdown percentage. They're 4th in hurry percentage. Like, they get after the quarterback. And more importantly for the Vikings, they impact the quarterback. And I know that, Joe Flacco's been around, right? He played in the NFC North when that division was kind of at its peak. And, the Browns were awful, but the Pittsburgh Steelers had these great defenses. And so Joe Flacco has seen weird looks. He's seen good looks. He's seen great defenses before, right? Like, those Steeler defenses in like the early 2010s were better than, they're probably better than every other defense in the NFL currently, right? Like, those defenses with Troy Polamalu and Harrison and those guys were nothing short of nasty. So the Vikings, as weird as their defense is, and as much as they like to blitz and all those things, as much as they enjoy doing all of that, they're not going to show Joe Flacco anything that he hasn't seen before. And I've heard some Colts fans, try and talk themselves into, Joe Flacco being the starter by saying that, he won't be surprised by blitzes. He's going to identify everything, and he's going to read coverages properly, and he's going to do all these things so well, and it's going to make it easier for the Colts and all that kind of stuff. But I don't care about that. I really don't. Like, sure, it's great that Joe Flacco is going to be able to identify where blitzes are coming from. Great. Fantastic. The Vikings get home, though, when they bring pressure. And this Colts offensive line has struggled mightily these last few weeks in terms of protecting Anthony Richardson, and now they're tasked with having to protect Joe Flacco. The Indianapolis Colts are 17th in the NFL this season in pressure allowed. Okay, so they're just barely below average. Okay, the Vikings are going to get home against this offensive line and against Joe Flacco, whether Joe Flacco reads the blitz properly or not. Okay, all that Joe Flacco knowing where the pressure is coming from, it's just like, okay, if I get sacked, I know it's going to come from over there, because Joe Flacco isn't getting away from the pressure that the Vikings are about to throw at him. He just simply doesn't have the mobility. How do the Colts deal with the pressure that they know is going to come? Once again, the Vikings blitz more than any other team in the NFL. They've blitzed on 40% of their opponents' dropbacks this season. I'm assuming that the counter for this is that they're going to get the ball out quickly. The issue is that's what everyone says is the counter for this. And the Vikings defense has still been really good this year. And also the Vikings know that the counter is to get the ball out quick. So I'm going to just assume that they're going to have, measures in place to keep the Colts from doing that. Okay. But the really exciting thing about this, about how the Colts are probably going to look to get the ball out quickly, is that, like, Twitter's going to be a great place. We're going to get on there. on Sunday, and it's going to be Joe Flacco throwing slants and screens and all these different things. And then we're going to have people who love Anthony Richardson being like, why didn't they call these plays for Anthony, huh? It's going to be great. I can't wait to see the arguments that happen there. And with all that being said, getting the ball out quickly for Joe Flacco is the key for the offense on Sunday night. Because first and foremost, I don't think the Colts are going to be able to run the ball. More on that here in the next few minutes. But when you look at Joe Flacco's numbers over the last 2 years against the blitz, there's a noticeable drop-off. These stats were provided by Warren Sharp. He does a great job, does really good deep dives and all those things. So when Joe Flacco holds the ball for 2 seconds or less against the blitz, his yards per attempt is 8.2, which is the 6th best in the NFL. His completion percentage is 80%, which is the 10th best in the NFL. And that's on 25 dropbacks. When Joe Flacco holds the ball for over 2 seconds, his yards per attempt drops to 6, which is 51st in the NFL. And his completion percentage drops to 46%, which is 53rd in the NFL. And that's on 45 dropbacks. There is a significant decrease in efficiency and production, for that matter, from Joe Flacco when he has to hold the ball against the blitz, which makes sense. Every quarterback's efficiency probably goes down when they have to hold the ball longer against the blitz, especially guys like Joe Flacco that aren't going to leave the pocket and extend the play for an extra 3 or 4 seconds. Okay? The Colts, Shane Steichen, have to get the ball out quickly. Okay, Joe Flacco's better when he gets the ball out fast, and this offensive line just isn't going to hold up against this Vikings blitz-heavy defense. Okay, and look, I don't expect for the Colts to have a run game to support Joe Flacco. Okay, for 2 reasons. First and foremost, whenever Joe Flacco has played, they've been extremely pass-heavy. They threw the football 44 times against Jacksonville. Part of that was because they were down late in the game, and obviously when you're down late, you have to throw the ball more. But against the Titans, a game that they won, a game that they were consistently leading in, they threw it 38 times. Like, they're going to drop back and throw the football a ton. Okay, Shane Steichen has made it clear that he wants to throw the football. Okay, throw to get ahead, run the football to win. That seems to be Shane Steichen's memo. Jonathan Taylor's awesome. Jonathan Taylor's been the best running back in the NFL, him or Derrick Henry, to start the year. But the Jonathan Taylor production is going to go down alongside Joe Flacco. The run game just isn't as good when Anthony Richardson's out. The Colts have averaged 3.7 yards per carry when Joe Flacco has been the starting quarterback. Now, Jonathan Taylor didn't play in those games, but Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson have been more successful with Anthony Richardson at quarterback as opposed to the 2 games with Joe Flacco. Now, to be fair, they've gotten limited carries with Anthony Richardson being the quarterback because Jonathan Taylor has been healthy for all those games. Either way, the Colts are going to have to figure out how to run the ball with Anthony Richardson standing on the sideline watching the game. Okay? And I'm just telling you, they aren't going to be as good on the ground, which gives the Vikings more opportunities to blitz. That gives Joe Flacco more opportunities to throw interceptions, which is a big deal for this game. Okay, because the Vikings are 3rd in the NFL, forcing 2.1 turnovers per game on average. Look, I don't care if Joe Flacco's the quarterback. I don't care if Tom Brady's the quarterback, Peyton Manning, me, you, your nephew, whoever. If you turn the football over twice in a game, you probably aren't going to win. That's just the simple reality of it. Okay, and if you do turn it over, then your defense has to be great. Like, this Colts defense has to be better than they have been going forward. Joe Flacco, and this isn't a knock on Joe Flacco because every quarterback is like this. Joe Flacco has been the most successful in his career when he's had an elite defense. Okay, once again, that's not a knock because Patrick Mahomes is going to be more successful, or he has been more successful when that Chiefs defense has been elite. So once again, not a knock on Joe Flacco, just an honest observation. Look at Flacco's time in Baltimore and his time in Cleveland last year. Okay, like, he needs a defense that can make up for the interceptions that he tends to throw. Okay, he threw 8 in 5 regular season games last year. Say what you want about Flacco. That's a lot. Okay, like let's not act like he's been perfect. He played well against Jacksonville. He did just enough to score 20 points against Tennessee through an awful interception in that game. Okay, the Colts defense, especially over this upcoming stretch, because they're about to play the best offenses that they've faced all year. The Colts defense has played one good offense this year. The Texans twice. The second time they played them, Stephon Diggs got hurt in the middle of the game, and Nico Collins didn't play. Okay, the first time that they played the Texans, though, when they were fully healthy and they had all their weapons, they gave up 29 points. Right, and then obviously, most recently, last Sunday, they gave up 23. The last game against the Texans was the best defensive output we've seen from this Colts team all year. They did a better job of stopping the run, right? Held the Texans as a team to under 100 rushing yards. They forced a big turnover. They held a good offense to just 23 points. That is the type of performance that we need from the Colts, right? They forced the big fumble late as well. I don't know if I said that or not, but that is like what the Colts defense has to be going forward with Joe Flacco at quarterback. Okay, because he scored 20 points against Tennessee, which isn't great. Okay, like this defense has to come out and play incredibly well. And that's going to be hard to do because they're playing against a Vikings team, a coach in Kevin O'Connell, who is an awesome head coach. He's got Sam Darnold, who's on his fourth team, and he's 27 years old. He's got Sam Darnold playing the best football of his career right now, right? And that being said, Sam Darnold's more than capable of throwing, 3 interceptions in a game and single-handedly losing the game for the Vikings, right? That's who he's been previously. We haven't seen him do that once this year. He had a bad game in London against New York, but that's really it. Okay, but let's just be honest. When we're looking at this Vikings offense compared to this Colts defense, the Colts don't have anyone who can guard Justin Jefferson. They don't, which to be fair, nobody does, but they don't have anyone who can guard Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson is back, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Aaron Jones is still one of the best running backs in the league. This offense is superior to this Colts defense. This offense that the Colts are about to play is the best offense they have seen all year. Okay, the Vikings are 7th in points per game. They're 8th in touchdown red zone percentage, meaning when they get in the red zone, they don't settle for field goals. This team scores touchdowns, and they're 13th in third down conversion percentage, which isn't great, but that's above average in the NFL. Okay, the Vikings are weird in that they don't put up a ton of yards, but part of that's because of the turnovers that they force. When that happens, you obviously have a shorter field, but this offense is really good. Okay, and so is this Minnesota Vikings defense. Both sides of the football for the Colts this week, they are going to have their hands full. Okay, the Vikings are one of the best teams in the NFL. There's no way around it. Okay, Sam Darnold is playing great football right now. Kevin O'Connell is a really good coach. Brian Flores is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. They've got really good players on defense. They've got great players on offense. This Vikings, there's a reason why they're 5-2. Okay, and I'm not going to hold, a loss to the Lions, who's, currently the second best team in the NFL behind the Chiefs, and I'm not going to hold a loss to the Rams, a team that was finally healthy, against them. This Vikings team is, I'm not going to say loaded, but they are clearly a playoff team. And outside of the Texans, the Colts haven't really played any playoff teams this year. So we're going to learn a lot about Indianapolis this upcoming Sunday. We're going to see what this offense looks like without Anthony Richardson. The passing game is going to be better. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But I do expect for this Colts run game to take a step back, which is concerning because it's important to have the ability to run the football on a consistent basis. And without Anthony Richardson back there in the backfield, I'm just not convinced that that's what is going to happen. So can't wait to watch this game. Sunday Night Football, prime time, going to be a blast to watch. Tomorrow, 3:30, Indiana on the road playing Michigan State. Curtis Rourke. Kurt Signetti came out yesterday and said that Curtis Rourke's going to play. I fully expect for Indiana to win this game. But if they didn't, there's going to be a single reason why. I'm going to tell you that reason when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Just wrapped up talking about the Vikings and the Colts Sunday Night Football. I realized I didn't give an official prediction of what I think is going to happen. I'm going to take the Vikings to win by double digits. A large part of why the Colts have stayed close in some of these and all these games is because of Anthony Richardson's ability to generate big plays down the field. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to have time to do that on Sunday. So there's that, and they're not going to have the run game to depend on like they've had in previous weeks with Anthony Richardson also in the backfield. Zack Gray set to hopefully join the show at some point today. He told me he would keep me in the loop on just everything going on. So hopefully he joins because, he's been on an absolute heater lately in the world of sports gambling. So hopefully we get to hear from Zack Gray at some point today. Indiana, Michigan State. Good news for Indiana fans, bad news for Michigan State fans. Not that I think there's many Michigan State fans tuning in today. Curtis Rourke, starting quarterback for the Indiana Hoosiers, who's completing, like 75% of his passes on the year. He's going to start for Indiana on Saturday. That's what Kurt Signetti reportedly came out and said. So that is big time. That is the biggest thing for Indiana this upcoming Saturday. Okay, everyone prefers to bet on, their team and root for their team when the starting quarterback is playing. Good job, Taven Jackson, for coming in for 1 week and, playing well. And the Indiana games, I love watching them play. I just do. Like, they're always prepared. You're never worried about whether or not they're going to come out flat. Like, that they're just going to show up and play like themselves. And that's what I expect for them to do on Saturday on the road in East Lansing. And if Indiana does show up and they are themselves and they do play hard and they do look prepared, they'll win this game easily because they're simply better than Michigan State. Michigan State isn't very good. Indiana has a high-powered offense. They lead the Big Ten in points per game at just under 47 points a game, that's a lot in college football. And Michigan State does not have a high-powered offense. They don't really do anything well on offense. They can't throw the ball. They've only thrown for 1,800 yards. They've thrown 7 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Michigan State can't really run the ball either. They're 13th in the Big Ten in total rushing yards, and they're 13th in the Big Ten in rushing yards per game on the year. They have 9 rushing touchdowns, and they fumbled the football 10 times. I am not the smartest person in the world, as you've probably figured out by now, but I'm very confident in saying that if you have an offense that's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns, and an offense that's fumbled the ball more times than they've rushed for touchdowns, then your offense is probably bad. And it is, right? Like, Michigan State loves to turn the football over. They do. And that has led to them not scoring very many points. They're 15th in the Big Ten in points per game, averaging only 21 points a game. I mean, it's just not a good team. And they're 11th in points allowed per game. Like, they don't do anything well. They don't get in the end zone. They don't keep other teams out of the end zone. They turn the ball over. They don't make other teams turn the ball over. It's just, they're bad. They can't throw the ball. They can't run it. They don't score. They don't get stops. Like, they just don't do anything well. I mean, the fact that this line's, it was 8 yesterday. It was a 7.5, and it moved up to 8. I'm assuming that it's moved up even more, and it'll spike again right before kickoff. But the fact that the spread was only 8 points is kind of insane. Now that Curtis Rourke has been named the starter, I'm assuming that line went up a fairly decent amount. But either way, 8 points is just insane. Oh, never mind. The line went back down. It's 7.5. That's absurd. Indiana should cover this easily. This game shouldn't be close. No contest. It should not be close. Shouldn't be close. Indiana is hands down better than Michigan State at every single thing. Okay, the only concern for IU, the only thing that I see where I'm like, that could be problematic, even though Curtis Rourke is back. The only thing is, this is IU's first real road game of the year. Okay, they went on the road to UCLA earlier in the season, and while the travel's tough, LA people aren't turning up for UCLA football games when they're that bad. It's just not happening. There's too many other things to do out there than go watch an awful UCLA team try to play football. Okay, so it's not really a tough road game outside of the travel. Their other road game was at Northwestern. Northwestern's playing at their practice field right now. There's like 30,000 people at the game. That's it. Like, that's not exactly a tough environment. That's slightly bigger than an SEC basketball stadium or a Big Ten basketball stadium. 30,000 people, that's it? Come on now. Okay, like this is the first real road test that Indiana is going to have this year. And winning on the road in any conference, especially the Big Ten, is always a challenge. And look, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're in year one of the Jonathan Smith era. Okay, you're 4-4. You were awful last year, right? You're doing everything you can to make a bowl game. So there's still, I'm not going to say excitement, right? But there's still some optimism there in East Lansing. This is a school that enjoys football. Like, they're going to show up and they're going to cheer, and it's going to be more than 30,000 people there, right? So this is going to be a little bit tougher of a road game than IU has had to play in this year. And winning on the road when you're good it's even harder because people are showing up hoping for this upset. And like, any positive plays for home underdogs in college football feel like they count for double. Okay. Like, they obviously don't, but like, if Indiana comes out, they haven't given up a first quarter point all year this year, but if they look up and they're down 10-0 or 10-3 at the end of the first quarter, like, things could get weird really quickly. If they look up in the fourth quarter and Indiana's only up by 4 with 4.5 minutes left, like, things can get weird really quickly in the world of college football, right? And like, that's the beauty of college football, right? Like, anybody can win on any given Saturday, right? Like, Northern Illinois can go into South Bend and beat Notre Dame. Like, if that can happen, then Michigan State can undoubtedly beat Indiana at home this year. Like that is 100% in the playing cards of things that could happen. With that being said, if Taven Jackson was playing, there'd be a much greater level of concern in terms of, road game, all those things. But since it's Curtis Rourke, I feel like Indiana rolls this game. Okay, like, this is a team that should win by double digits, right? Because Michigan State is simply just bad at football. They're just a bad football team. Okay, even though I do like Jonathan Smith, being able to go and build a winner at Oregon State in only like 2 years is like, that's a really impressive thing to do. But Michigan State, Big Ten, it's just different. Indiana, one of the 10 best teams in all of college football. They should win this game easily. Double digits, probably two touchdowns. At least Indiana just overwhelms Michigan State with their talents throughout the course of this game. Curtis Rourke has a big game in his return. I fully expect for Indiana to go out and absolutely roll the Michigan State Spartans. The other big game on Saturday in the Big Ten, Penn State, third-ranked Penn State's going on the road. They're taking on fourth-ranked Ohio State. And, this game obviously it's important for Indiana. That's why I'm talking about it. If you're an Indiana fan, you're pulling for Ohio State to win this game, right? Because this is Penn State's only tough game of the year. Penn State beats Ohio State, they will likely win every other game on their schedule because it's incredibly easy. Okay, whereas if Ohio State wins, they stay at one loss. Indiana has a chance to knock them out of the Big Ten, title game contention later on in the year. So if you're an Indiana fan, you are pulling for Ohio State in this game. Everything I'm hearing from a breakdown perspective is saying to pick Penn State. Okay, Ohio State doesn't know what they're doing at left tackle, right? Like, they played their third string left tackle last week. Now they're talking about moving a guard to tackle, and it's problematic for Ohio State. Okay, Penn State should have an advantage there because, like, even though I'm not a believer in Penn State, we'll get to that here in a minute. That defense is really good. Okay, they rush the passer, they do all those things, right? And then, Drew Aller, starting quarterback for Penn State, he got hurt. His backup, Bo Pribula, I hope I say that properly, came in against Wisconsin and was honestly better than Drew Aller, right? And currently Drew Aller is a game time decision for Saturday, but usually you'd think, oh, that's good for Ohio State. I'm not too sure that it is because Bo Pribula was not only good against Wisconsin, throwing the football, 11 of 13, 98 yards and a touchdown and no interceptions. He also ran the ball for 28 yards on 6 carries. He's more athletic than Drew Aller, which is another thing Ohio State would have to defend if Pribula played instead of Aller. Ohio State likes to play man-to-man. That's not what you want to do against a running quarterback. So even if Drew Aller doesn't play, Pribula poses a lot of issues for Ohio State. I don't care, though, in the slightest. I'm picking Ohio State to win this game easily, okay? And part of it is Will Howard, starting quarterback for Ohio State. He's from Pennsylvania, wanted to play at Penn State growing up. They never offered him coming out of high school. When he transferred out of Kansas State, they didn't offer him. So I bet that he's going to come out pretty well motivated. I think he's going to play really well just because of that. But the real reason is because Penn State just doesn't beat Ohio State. Just doesn't happen, right? Penn State's always overrated. They've never beaten Ohio State or Michigan. James Franklin is 1-12 against top 5 opponents. And I know what you're saying. Well, Jonathan, Ryan Day's record against top 5 opponents isn't very good either. Ryan Day's at least in all those games. Okay, James Franklin and Penn State usually aren't. And more importantly, Penn State doesn't beat Ohio State. That's why they've only won the Big Ten once during the James Franklin era, right? And the one year that they won the Big Ten was the one year that they beat Ohio State. But it's just so much more than that. Like, Ohio State just has a pedigree and an expectation that Penn State doesn't. And that really matters. Like, Ohio State expects to win this game. And I think the country expects for Ohio State to win this game. They're 3.5-point favorites on the road in Happy Valley right now. Meanwhile, the expectation for Penn State is to lose this game because that's what we've seen Penn State do repeatedly for the past decade, right? Like, they just don't win this game for whatever reason. It doesn't matter who's playing, who's not playing. Injuries don't seem to really matter. Penn State just doesn't beat Ohio State, whether it's in Happy Valley or if it's in Columbus. Okay, and there's just something there that gives Ohio State an edge. Like, I didn't really know how to explain this, so I'm gonna do my best to with this story. But I remember growing up, whenever I would play against my dad in anything, like he would always win, right? And we'd play 1-on-1 in the front yard in the driveway a lot. And I was playing all the time because I love basketball. And then God was like, Jonathan, you're gonna be 5'8", and your basketball dreams are gonna die when you're a freshman in high school because of that. And I was like, oh, all right. And I remember, early middle school, I beat my dad for the first time when I was in 7th grade. But I remember when I was in 6th grade, I played all the time. Played in the morning before school, played after school, played on the weekends at the local, YMCA or whatever. Played basketball all the time, and my dad didn't. And, I was better than him. I could shoot better. I could dribble the ball better, all those things. But I couldn't beat him, And I would come so close every time. And every time I would come close, my dad would remind me that I'd never beaten him before. And then, he didn't have to remind me. I already knew that. And that thought was in the back of my head. And I'd reach this point where I'd start trying too hard and I'd make a couple mistakes because I was trying too hard. And then my dad would come back and beat me. And it was the most frustrating thing ever. I'll never forget when I finally did beat my dad. I ran around my neighborhood. Didn't get tired. I was so excited. Ran in the house, told my mom. My dad was laughing. I think he was annoyed. We played again and he beat me 11-0. But hey, that's fine. It's a similar thing here for Penn State. Okay, they know they haven't beaten Ohio State in 7 years. Okay, and if this game is close, which it could be, because this is one of the better teams we've seen Penn State have in the last 7 years, and this is supposed to be a great Ohio State team, but we haven't really seen it from them, right? And then, the left tackle gets hurt and their offensive line has been in shambles since then. That's why they struggled against Nebraska. They couldn't block those dudes. And if they couldn't block Nebraska's guys, I don't think they're going to be able to block Penn State's guys because, like I said, I don't have any faith in Penn State to win this football game. I fully expect for Ohio State to, but Penn State really talented on the defensive side of the football. And if this game's close late, which I think it will be because, like I said, Penn State is better than normal and Ohio State hasn't been as good this year. it's gonna be close late, and all those Penn State guys are gonna be like, "Oh, are we gonna be the first team in 7 years to win this game?" Right? And then like those expectations and things kind of start to creep in, and then you tense up or you get overly excited, and then you commit a dumb penalty that gives Ohio State a first down, and then you look up and you lose by 10. Okay. That is what I'm expecting to happen. Penn State just doesn't beat Ohio State. They always figure out a way to lose. They're always overrated. Once again, James Franklin, 1-12 against top 5 opponents. Okay. Like this is also just a big game beyond Big Ten championship, stuff. Right. Obviously, once again, Indiana fans, you want Ohio State to win this game because that will, you know, not remove them from, Big Ten championship contention. But, if Penn State loses and Indiana beats Ohio State, they'll have a great path to the title game because obviously Ohio State will have 2 losses. And then when you look at record against common opponent, Indiana would have a better record than Penn State against common opponents because they would have beaten Ohio State and Penn State would have lost to them. So they would then get the nod over Penn State. So Indiana fans, once again, you want Ohio State to win. But from a Penn State, Ohio State perspective, this is a huge game, not just because it's number 3 versus number 4, not just because, a spot in the Big Ten title game could be on the line, but both of these coaches, fan bases are not happy with. This feels like the year for Penn State. Ohio State fans continue to look for any reason to complain about Ryan Day. Both guys have struggled in big games. And if Ryan Day loses to Penn State, that Ohio State fan base is going to go nuts. And they should, right? Like that's a fan base with high standards. And if Penn State loses to Ohio State, again, that fan base is going to be tired of James Franklin. That's just the way that it is. And like I'm kind of jealous of those two fan bases because they both have incredibly high expectations for their coaches and for their teams. I don't expect for Colts fans to understand that because a lot of them are cool with 9-8 and barely making the playoffs and then losing in the first round. But that's how it is in Columbus. That's how it is at Penn State. They have high expectations. And if either one of these coaches, James Franklin or Ryan Day, loses this game, it'll be viewed as, by their fan bases, of them not meeting the expectations that they have. And that usually means hot seat, no matter how many games you've won. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Penn State, Ohio State, that game has inspired my fun list Friday for the week. It's a good one. I'm excited for it. I think it's fun list Friday. It's a lot of fun. And I'm going to give you that list when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Still waiting to hear back from Zack Gray to see if we're going to get him on the show today or not. Duty calls sometimes. Duty calls, but we do have a bet from listener C. Fitch. C. Fitch says to take IU and Oregon and parlay it. Sounds good to me. I don't know. I think betting on IU is always a good idea, especially when they're only 7.5 favorites against bad teams like Michigan State. And look, Oregon's playing Michigan. Michigan's not good. Okay, the only hope they have is that game is in Ann Arbor. They're changing quarterbacks again. So big fan of the idea of parlaying those things together. Funless Friday, as we do every Friday, is inspired by Penn State and them likely losing to Ohio State on Saturday. Funless Friday this week is a list of 10 teams that just never really seem to live up to the hype. Okay, teams that just never come through on the expectations set before them, just like Penn State. Okay, so I wanted to highlight some other teams in different sports that also kind of fall into this category of every year people have expectations for them and they never meet them. Okay, so obviously Penn State, they lost to Ohio State 7 times in a row, never made a college football playoff, only won the Big Ten once during the James Franklin era. All those things, Penn State has to both be on and start the list. They just never seem to meet the expectations. It seems like every year is the year of Penn State, and then they lose to Ohio State and or Michigan. Next on the list, Notre Dame football. Okay, like you saw this one coming. Notre Dame beats a bunch of bad teams every year. Maybe they beat a good team in week 1 like they did this year. When they do that, though, they then lose to teams like Northern Illinois at home. So Notre Dame, they'll beat a bunch of bad teams, and then they show up in their bowl game and they get blown out. That's just who Notre Dame has been for over a decade now, right? Build everybody up, they get everybody excited, and then they come crashing down, right? They just never seem to live up to the expectation. Next on the list, the New York Jets. It seems like people get excited about the Jets, not every year, but almost every year, these last 2 years, especially though. Meanwhile, the Jets haven't made the playoffs in 13 years, right? They've had some seasons in there where people expected them to be good. A lot of people predicted them to win the AFC East this year. All those things, and now they're 3-6. Congratulations, you beat the Texans, who didn't have Stephon Diggs or Nico Collins last night. So, I turn on your TVs today, they're going to talk about the Jets all day because for whatever reason, people have high expectations for them. I don't really know why. Next, the Miami Dolphins. Under Mike McDaniel, all they've done is lose in the first round of the playoffs. And this year, they're just flat out a bad football team. They just don't meet the expectations that are set before them, even going all the way back to the days of Dan Marino. They couldn't win the Super Bowl. They just consistently fell short. They never lived up to the hype. I'm sure that during the Marino era, there were a lot of people picking them every year to go win the Super Bowl, and they just couldn't make it happen. So the Miami Dolphins have to be on this list. Next, the Dallas Cowboys. Do I have to explain this one? Right? I mean, we get excited. Not we. People get excited about the Cowboys every year. Oh, this is their year. They're going to be good. Meanwhile, Tony Romo, if I remember correctly, never won a playoff game. Dak Prescott's 2-5 in the playoffs. And winning walked out the door when Jimmy Johnson left. Ever since then, they've consistently underachieved whatever the expectation for them has been every year, just like Penn State and Penn State, Notre Dame, the Jets, and the Dolphins. Next on the list, a couple NBA teams in here. The Knicks haven't won a title since 1973. Despite having high expectations through the 90s with Patrick Ewing, they only made it to the finals once. Haven't made an Eastern Conference Finals since 2000. The Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire era. They had expectations those years. They never met them. They had expectations last year. They couldn't get to the Eastern Conference Finals as the 2 seed. Thank you, Indiana Pacers. The New York Knicks, another team that just always seems to come up short. Next on the list, the Los Angeles Clippers couldn't beat the Warriors during the Lob City era, right? They made one Western Conference Finals during the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George era. This is another team that no matter how good or bad you expect them to be, they just never quite live up to that expectation. Next, the New York Yankees haven't met expectations since 2009. They had a chance to win the World Series this year. and they lost in 5 games. I still can't believe that 5th inning might be my favorite inning of baseball ever. Actually, that's not true. The 2016 Cubs World Series probably has my favorite inning of baseball in there somewhere, but that Yankees 5th inning the other night, oh, it's so great. I hope I never forget that inning. Remember, sad, I'm just going to think about Game 5, 5th inning Yankees versus Dodgers, and it's just going to bring a huge smile to my face. Anyway, last team on the list, and then we'll get back to some more football, NFL stuff. Kentucky basketball, they haven't made a Sweet 16 since 2019. 5 straight years of first weekend exits. Isn't living up to the hype at all, especially when you're at Kentucky, a team that expects Sweet 16s at a minimum every single year. Almost put Indiana basketball on the list, but they've been underachieving for so long. They don't even have big national expectations anymore. So I decided to leave Indiana basketball off of the list. Yeah, so there you go. That's the Fun List Friday for teams that never seem to live up to the hype. We got other big NFL games happening this weekend that I am really excited about. The Broncos at the Ravens. That line, this game is so interesting to me because, through watching the Broncos, I'm like, yeah, this team's good. Ignore that their last 3 wins have come against arguably the 3 worst teams in the NFL. So I see that, and then obviously we all know that the Ravens are good, but they've got these 2 weird losses, right? They lost last weekend, and they lost to the Raiders even earlier in the year. So they've got, they're very capable of being beat, yet the Ravens they opened as 9.5-point favorites. It's moved down a whole point. They're 8.5-point favorites now. The Broncos are good, especially on defense. Bo Nix has had some bad games, but the Ravens are giving up more passing yards per game than any other team in the NFL. But it's Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and they just added, Deontay Johnson from Carolina. They should win. The Ravens should. But 8.5 points feels like a lot. The game of the day, though, is right here. It's Lions and Packers. Every NFC North battle is big because that's the best division in the NFL. Like Bears, Packers, Vikings, who the Colts play on Sunday Night Football. That game's big for both teams, obviously. Colts looking to get over 500. Minnesota trying to avoid 3 straight losses. What a terrible time to play Minnesota when they're coming off their 3rd loss. They played Thursday Night Football, so they've had extra days to rest, recover, and get ready for the Colts. So tough timing there for Indianapolis. But Lions, Packers, big game there. Should be interesting. Lions only favored by 2.5 points. They're on the road in Green Bay. I don't know if Jordan Love's playing or not. Either way, you just kind of expect for Matt LaFleur at this point to do his thing and help Malik Willis, if he plays, play well. Because Malik Willis has only played well under Matt LaFleur. It's it is impressive. No kind of about it. So Lions, Packers, that game should be fun to watch. The Rams then play the Seahawks, and it's like, Jonathan, why is this 3-4 Rams team playing against the 4-4 Seahawks? Why is this a big deal? Because the NFC West isn't good. That's why. Okay, the Cardinals, or let me back up. The NFC West is good. Talk about teams not meeting expectations, though. The Arizona Cardinals are currently sitting atop the division, and they're 4-4. I think the 2 teams that everyone would have expected to win that division, the 49ers or the Rams, they're both 3-4, sitting in 3rd and 4th place in that division. That's why this Rams and Seahawks game is such a big deal. Okay, the Rams were written off, right, because they started off so terribly, but they're healthy again. If they win, they'll be 500. The Seahawks started 3-0, but now they're 4-4. They're trying to get back on track. They're trying to earn a place atop the NFC West. So that game is interesting. It should be good. Speaking of working to be atop the division, the Houston Texans lost last night, and they looked bad. People are going to make a really big deal out of it. But look, first and foremost, the Jets defense is talented. Okay, they've invested picks and money on that side of the ball. The other thing is, every offense in the NFL, no matter who the quarterback is, gets worse when your 2 best receivers go out. Okay, so people are going to make a big deal about, oh, Houston lost Thursday Night Football prime time because, look, primetime games just count for double. That's just the reality of it, right? For whatever reason, they just carry a little bit more weight. I think that's just because everyone's watching and everyone's paying attention. But people are going to freak out about Houston. I heard a guy this morning say, oh, if the Colts win tonight or Sunday night, they're only a game out of first place. That's not true because the Texans hold the tiebreaker. Texans are still good. Nico Collins is going to come back at some point this year. Like, he pulled his hamstring. He didn't tear his ACL like Stephon Diggs did. So if you hear people selling stock on Houston, buy it up because that team's still good. Okay. Like, I get it. They scored 10 points in front of the whole country. So people are going to overreact, say that they aren't very good. And those people are simply wrong. No other way around it. Okay. Now, their defense didn't look great, right? That would be the one thing for me about the Jets and Houston game last night that I would be concerned about. Like, that Houston Texans defense gave up, it says that they gave up 21. It should be 28, but, because Deshaun Jackson's the most influential football player ever, apparently, the rookie for the Jets, Conley, decided to drop the ball before he walked into the end zone, which I just don't understand. Like, that has to drive football coaches absolutely mad. Okay. Like, I really hope Shane Steichen is telling his guys, like, hey, when you score a touchdown, hand the ball to the ref. That way you don't look dumb like that on national television. Cause that's like, Also, I need someone to explain to me how that Garrett Wilson catch counted last night, but the George Pickens, same foot in twice didn't. Okay. Like, if that Garrett Wilson catch counted, then getting the same foot down twice should also count. But hey, whatever. But yeah, the Texans, they're 6-3. That was a game that the Colts really needed them to lose because the schedule for the Texans does not get any easier coming up. They got the Lions this next week at the Cowboys. That's not a tough game. And then they get the Titans and the Jaguars, which divisional games are always tough. And then they get the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. So there's 3 games on there that are definitely potential losses that, the Colts need the Texans to lose all 3 to have any sort of chance at winning this division. But by the time they get to the Chiefs and the Ravens at the end of the year, I mean, they'll have Nico Collins back, and that Houston Texans offense will be just fine. When we come back here in about, 5 minutes, 11 o'clock when we return, Colts, Vikings, big game on Sunday. Going to talk about that quite a bit. Still waiting on Zack Gray to get back to me. Hopefully we get to have him on at some point today because he's been on an absolute heater in the world of sports gambling. But when we come back here in about 4.5 minutes, Colts, Vikings, I'll give you my thoughts and why the Colts are going to lose.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Happy Friday. Football last night. Basketball tonight. Pacers on the road taking on the Pelicans. Can't wait to watch that. Colts, Vikings. That's obviously happening Sunday night football. Can't wait. Love primetime games. Can't wait to see everyone drop their thoughts on this Colts team. So injuries shouldn't really matter all that much this week. Bernard Raymond's out. That'll obviously have an impact on, the Indianapolis Colts. Anytime you lose your starting left tackle, whether they're good or bad, like that obviously impacts the way that you're going to play. Vikings are relatively healthy as well. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be any sort of advantage in the world of this team's more injured than this other team. I talked a bit about this game yesterday, and the headlining thing is the Vikings are going to blitz like crazy, right? They blitz more than any other team in the NFL, and it works, right? Like they've blitzed so far this year on 41% of their opponents' dropbacks. And more importantly, like, look, you can blitz all you want. Doesn't matter if you don't impact the opposing team's quarterback. The Vikings do. They lead the NFL in pressures. They're fourth in sacks. They're third in knockdown percentage, and they're fourth in hurry percentage. This team gets after the quarterback as well as, if not better than, everyone else in the NFL. Okay, like they are going to have an impact on Joe Flacco. They're going to give this, what is slowly becoming a bad Colts offensive line, a lot of issues. Okay, and Joe Flacco has been around. Okay, this is year 17. Okay, there's not a defense this guy hasn't seen. There's not a blitz package this guy isn't aware of, right? The guy played in the NFC North, for crying out loud, right? In the mid-2010s when the Pittsburgh Steelers were at their freaking peak. Okay, the dude got to practice against Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. Okay, like this guy, like I said, he's seen everything, right? Like those Steeler defenses he faced are probably better than any defense that you see now. Okay, like Joe Flacco has been around, and like I said, there's like the Vikings aren't going to show him anything he hasn't seen. I don't really care about that though, because whether Joe Flacco has seen it or not, whether Joe Flacco knows where the pressure is coming from or not, this Colts offensive line isn't good. They have really struggled these past few weeks. Okay, like they have. Anthony Richardson, a guy who's incredibly mobile, was sacked 5 times last week against the Texans, and they didn't blitz like the Vikings are going to. Okay, like that's the reality of what happened. The week before that, Anthony Richardson was running around, for his life like crazy. Okay, like this is not a good offensive line as of late, and Bernard Raymond, starting left tackle, isn't going to play on Sunday. So sorry, but I don't really care if Joe Flacco knows where the blitz is coming from, because this Colts offensive line is 17th in the NFL in pressure allowed. Okay, the Vikings are going to get home whether Joe Flacco reads the blitz correctly or not. Now, obviously, it'll give him, an extra second or so if he knows where the blitz is coming from. But at the end of the day, this guy doesn't have the mobility to evade pressure. Okay, the guy's a statue. Seriously, like that's what he is. I know he had the 21-yard run against Tennessee and all those things, but like that's obviously not a normal occurrence for him. Like, how are the Colts going to deal with this relentless pressure that the Vikings are going to throw their way? I'm assuming they're going to look to get the ball out quick. Okay, like that is, the very simple solution. I kind of hope that that's what the Colts do, because if the Colts are snapping it and throwing it out quick and they're running screens and drag routes and slant routes and all these things, like if that's what they're doing, then I can't wait to go to Twitter and see Colts fans complaining about how they never called these plays for Anthony Richardson. Like, Twitter's going to be just a lovely place on Sunday night. I really can't wait one way or the other. Like, if Joe Flacco's awesome, all the Joe Flacco truthers are going to be like, oh, he should have been playing from week 1. And if Joe Flacco's bad, then you're going to get all the Anthony Richardson truthers like, I thought we were trying to win right now, and it's this guy. Come on. Can't wait. Twitter's going to be an absolute playground on Sunday night. If you see me tweet Sunday night, just know it's probably going to be very sarcastic. Follow me on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith if you want to see me not troll, but just get sarcastic with people. I can't wait. It's going to be just an absolute blast. But either way, getting the ball out quickly for Joe Flacco is the key for this Colts offense on Sunday night. And, part of that is the blitz. But the other thing is Joe Flacco is just better when he gets the ball out quickly, which, isn't some revelation, right? Especially against the blitz. Here's Joe Flacco's numbers against the blitz the last 2 years. Warren Sharp at, I think, Sharp Football on Twitter, he put these out. Very appreciative of him doing this. So when Joe Flacco holds the ball for 2 seconds or less, his yards per attempt is 8.2, which is 6th in the NFL over the last 2 years. His completion percentage is 80%, which is 10th in the NFL over the last 2 years, right? And that, it's a very small sample size that's only on 25 dropbacks. So when Joe Flacco holds the football for over 2 seconds against the blitz, his yards per attempt is he averages 6 yards per attempt, which is 51st in the NFL over the last 2 years. His completion percentage drops to 46%, which is 53rd in the NFL, and that is on 45 dropbacks. Now, I'm not going to sit here and rip Joe Flacco because his numbers drop when he holds the ball longer against the blitz. I'd be willing to bet that every quarterback in the NFL's numbers drop when they hold the ball longer against the blitz. The concerning thing about these two sets of numbers is that there's been 70 dropbacks. On 45 of them, he's held the football too long, over 2 seconds. That is the issue, right? When I look at these numbers, like Joe Flacco has to get rid of the ball quickly because it's clear that his decision-making isn't as good when he holds the ball longer against the blitz. And look, he's 39. Like, this dude's like, comparing him to Anthony Richardson isn't fair, but we're not going to see him run around and extend plays at the same rate that Anthony Richardson has when he's been the quarterback for the Colts. So when it comes to Flacco, get the ball out quick, slants to Josh Downs, drags to Michael Pittman, maybe, an occasional go ball to A.D. Mitchell or somebody, but get the ball out quickly. That is the recipe for success, not only for the Colts offense, but also for Joe Flacco, if you want to be more specific. Okay. And I think we're going to see a lot of quick passing game stuff from the Colts in this game, not only because of the blitzing, but also because I don't expect for the Colts to run the ball very well. Okay. I think they're really going to struggle to run the football because once again, this Vikings defense is good. It's one of the better ones in the NFL. Plus, like when Joe Flacco's played, I know Jonathan Taylor hasn't been on the field, but first, the Colts have been extremely pass heavy. Okay, they threw it 44 times against Jacksonville. Now they were down, they were trailing late in the game. They had to throw the football. And then they threw it 38 times against the Titans. That's a lot. And it wasn't like they were down by multiple scores like they were against Jacksonville. Shane Steichen wants to throw the football. He's made that abundantly clear. Okay, throw to get ahead, run to win. That is Shane Steichen's philosophy when it comes to throwing versus running the football. Okay, Jonathan Taylor's awesome. Okay, he's been either him or Derrick Henry has been the best running back in the NFL throughout the first 8 weeks. But his production will go down alongside Joe Flacco. Okay, the run game just isn't as good when Anthony Richardson isn't on the field. Okay, the Colts averaged 3.7 yards per carry when Joe Flacco has been the starting quarterback. Once again, Jonathan Taylor not playing in those games. Either way, don't care. Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson were more successful running the ball alongside Anthony Richardson as opposed to when they were alongside Joe Flacco. Once again, to be fair, they've gotten limited carries when Jonathan Taylor has been healthy, which has been, every game that Anthony Richardson has played in. Okay, either way, no matter how you slice it, I'm so intrigued not only to see how the Colts deal with the blitz, but how are they going to run the football? Because once again, this offensive line has slowly gotten worse as the year has progressed. Okay, and obviously no threat of Anthony Richardson to run the ball makes it harder to run the ball. Like when you're only concerned about Jonathan Taylor, it's a little bit easier to kind of keep him in check. So how the Colts run the football And how do they deal with the blitz? Those are the two things that I'm so intrigued to see how they deal with. Okay. Most importantly, they have to avoid turnovers, right? And that doesn't matter who's playing quarterback, whether it's Joe Flacco, me, you, or Richardson. It doesn't matter. Okay. Like, you have to avoid turnovers if you want to win games in the NFL. The Vikings force a lot of turnovers. They're averaging 2 turnovers forced per game. Okay. And look, if the Colts turn the ball over twice, you can kiss this game goodbye. They are not winning the football game if they turn it over twice. Okay. So that's the biggest thing for the offense. How do they deal with the blitz? Do they figure out how to run the ball? And most importantly, they have to avoid turnovers. Colts, on the defensive side of the ball, this is really important. Okay. Like, the Colts are going to win games with defense now, which isn't super comforting. Okay. Now, Joe Flacco has been the most successful in his career when he's had an elite defense. And that is not a knock on Joe Flacco. That is a statement that is true for every single quarterback in the NFL. Okay. If the Chiefs defense wasn't as good as it is, the Chiefs wouldn't be good because Patrick Mahomes has thrown, 8 interceptions or whatever it is on the year. It's the same thing with the Packers, right? Jordan Love has thrown 9 interceptions on the year. The Packers would probably lose a lot of games if their defense wasn't as good as it is. Okay, so once again, saying that Joe Flacco has been more successful in his career with an elite defense is not a knock, but it's the truth, because Joe Flacco he's very capable of turning the football over. Like, he is, for his career. His touchdown to interception ratio is less than 2-1. He threw 8 interceptions in 5 regular season games last year, and then we all know what happened in the playoff game: back-to-back pick sixes. Okay, like, Joe Flacco needs a defense that at times can make up for when he turns the football over, because, like, I know he played well against Jacksonville, and I know that he scored a whopping 20 points against the Titans. But let's not act like this guy's some stud who's perfect. Okay, he's very average. If he was better, then the Colts wouldn't have been the only team in the offseason to offer him a contract. Okay, so this Colts defense has been okay throughout the year. They're keeping teams out of the end zone, but they haven't played very many good teams. Like, the Colts just haven't played many good offenses this year, right? Obviously, they've played Houston twice. That's really the only good offense that they have played. Seriously, like, when they played the Packers didn't have Jordan Love. They played the Bears, and it was Caleb Williams' 3rd game of his career, and then they played the Steelers with Justin Fields, and then they gave up 37 to the Jaguars, right? And then they played the Titans with Will Levis, and then they played the Dolphins with no Tua. Like, they've really caught a lot of breaks with these teams that they've played against, because they just haven't played very many good offenses. Like this Vikings game, this is arguably going to be the best offense that they've played against all year. And when you look at their games against Houston, who up to this point has been the best offense that they've played, they gave up 29 points in week 1, right? And then last week they only gave up 23. So it's like, oh, they got better. Well, no Nico Collins, and Stephon Diggs tore his ACL in the middle of the game. So I'm very intrigued to see how this Colts defense performs against what is a legitimately good offense and against what is a legitimately good offensive head coach. Kevin O'Connell is one of the best coaches in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. He's got Sam Darnold playing the best football of his career right now, although he's more than capable of throwing 3 interceptions in a game. Justin Jefferson, he's going to have a field day because the Colts don't have anyone, which, to be fair, no one in the NFL does, have anyone who can guard Justin Jefferson. I don't know if the Colts have anyone who can guard Jordan Addison either. The Vikings starting tight end comes back this week. Hawkinson, he's one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Aaron Jones is still one of the better running backs in the NFL. Like, this is as complete of an offense as the Colts have played this year. Their left tackle got hurt, out for the year. The Vikings made a trade with Jacksonville to bring in what is a solid left tackle. So, like, this Vikings offense is going to be good. Once again, this is as complete of an offense as the Colts have played this year. The Vikings are 7th in points per game. They're 8th in touchdown red zone percentage. So, in other words, when they get in the red zone, they're going to score a touchdown, probably not kick a field goal. And then they're 13th in third down conversion percentage, which isn't great. It's slightly above average. Okay. And so I say all that. And then, if you go look at the numbers yourself, you're going to be like, well, the Vikings don't put up a ton of yards. So do they really move the football? The answer is yes. The reason why their yard gainage is down is because when the Vikings force turnovers, it's usually in plus territory. Okay. So instead of the Vikings having to go on 75-yard drives, they're going on 45-yard drives. So that's why the yard gainage is down. Okay. So this Vikings offense, very complete. They're going to pose a lot of issues for this bad Colts defense because I still have a ton of faith in it. And defensively, like they're going to give the Colts a lot of issues with the blitzes that they throw at them. Like both sides of the football for the Colts this week are going to have their hands full against the Vikings. Okay, this is one of the best teams in the NFL without a doubt. They're looking to avoid their third straight loss, which, you never want to play a good team when they're trying to avoid losing 3 straight. And the Vikings played Thursday night football last week. This is a team that's had extra time to rest and extra time to prepare. This is a bad week to play against the Minnesota Vikings. So, with all that being said, Colts lose by double digits. I don't think this game is going to be particularly close. I think the Colts are really going to struggle to run the football. The Vikings are going to blitz the crap out of Joe Flacco. I think it's going to look a lot like Houston's offense last night, where CJ Stroud just didn't have any time to really throw the football. I think it's going to be the same thing for Joe Flacco. He's just not going to have the time to sit back there and throw it 35 times. He's not going to have the time, and this Colts offensive line is going to struggle to run the football, even though Jonathan Taylor is obviously going to play. So I like the Vikings by double digits on Sunday night. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully I'm wrong. I really hope I am because I want the Colts to win. It's more fun when they win. Simple as that. When we come back in about 4 minutes, speaking of winning, the Indiana Hoosiers 8-0, looking to improve to 9-0 before the first college football playoff ranking comes out. It comes out Tuesday, November 5th. Can't wait for that. Curtis Rourke, he's going to play against Michigan State. Seems like they should win. Seems like they should cover the 8-point spread. I got it at 7.5 on FanDuel. Feels like an easy cover, but there's one aspect of the game that could kind of throw Indiana for a loop. I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
Indiana heads on the road tomorrow, 3:30. They're taking on the Michigan State Spartans in East Lansing. Kurt Cignetti came out yesterday, said that Curtis Rourke's going to play. That's a good thing. Indiana needs him. They're obviously better than they are with Taven Jackson, who I didn't think played too bad against Washington, played well enough for them to win, and that's really all that matters. Indiana on the road against Michigan State once again Saturday at 3:30. The biggest thing for Indiana is that Curtis Rourke is going to play. Okay, that is the biggest thing, right? Everyone prefers to bet on a team and to root for their team when the starting quarterback is actually playing, especially when that quarterback's completing, 75% of his passes on the season. And the Indiana thing is so interesting. Like, I love talking about him because it's so simple. It really is with Indiana. Like, whenever I talk about, the Colts, like, every little detail matters. Who's hurt, who's not hurt, where's the game at, what's the weather like? Like, you just, every little thing matters. And then when it comes to Indiana, it's just like, I don't know, are they going to show up? Because if they show up, I feel like they're going to win, because that they're going to be prepared. They've got older guys, guys that have transferred in and won at previous places. Like, when it comes to Indiana and Michigan State, if Indiana shows up, they should win because they're just simply better than Michigan State is, right? Indiana's got this high-powered offense leading the Big Ten in scoring, and Michigan State doesn't. Michigan State's just a bad football team. Okay, they can't throw the ball. All right, they've only thrown for 1,800 yards. They've thrown 7 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. That's not good. They can't run the ball. They're 13th in the Big Ten in total rushing yards on the season, and they're 13th in the Big Ten in rushing yards per game on the year. They have 9 rushing touchdowns, and they fumbled the football 10 times. I'm no genius, but if you have a football team that's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns and fumbled the ball more times than they have rushing touchdowns, then that team probably isn't very good. Okay, Michigan State just loves to turn the football over, apparently, right? They're 15th in the Big Ten in points per game, only averaging 21 a game, and a large part of that is because they like to turn the football over. And it's not like they get stops. They are 11th in points allowed per game in the Big Ten. They just don't do anything well. They don't, okay? They don't do anything well. They can't throw the ball. They don't really run the ball. They don't score points. They don't get stops. They turn the ball over. They don't turn the other team over. This is just a bad Michigan State team, and the fact that the spread is only 8 points is kind of insane. Kind of insane, right? The only concern for Indiana is that this is their first real road game of the year, right? Like, when you look at their schedule, they've played 2 road games. One was at UCLA, and no one in Los Angeles is turning up to watch a bad UCLA team play football. If they were good, then maybe, but they're not. They're bad, right? And then they went on the road to play at Northwestern, and Northwestern's currently playing at their practice field where, 20,000 people can come watch. Like, it's not really a tough road environment, and that's going to change on Saturday because Indiana's ranked 13th. Michigan State, they're trying to rally the program, right? New era, new head coach. They're 4-4. They're fighting to make a bowl game and do all those things. So, like, this is going to be a bit more of a challenge. I still expect Indiana to win. I still expect them to cover the 8 points. But anytime you're going in somewhere and you're ranked 13th and everyone expects you to win, like, things just get weird and different. Like any positive play for home underdogs feel like they just count for double. Okay, like if Indiana allows Michigan State to hang around at all, like, things could get really weird really fast because that's just the nature of college football. I expect for Indiana to cover the 8-point spread. Some places have it at 8.5. FanDuel has it at 7.5. So whatever the spread is, I fully expect for Indiana to win at this game. Like, they should cover pretty easily. Like, this is a Indiana team that should win by double digits. No doubt in my mind about that. If Taven Jackson was playing, I'd undoubtedly feel different, but it's Curtis Rourke. Like, I know he's got the thumb injury, but if he's progressed to a point where he can play, then I'm going to expect him to just continue to be, the Curtis Rourke that he was before he got hurt, right? Where he's diamond, like he's so good. Like this is a guy who's probably going to be a late round draft pick. They should roll easily. I'm thinking 38-14 should be an absolute blowout. Because once again, Michigan State's not good. They want to turn the ball over. They don't throw it well. They don't run it well, and they don't get stops. That is, in short, a bad football team. To be fair to them, they've played a decently tough schedule. That's probably part of why their numbers are the way that they are. Like they played Ohio State, I believe, in Columbus, and I think they lost 38-3, right? Like they've had to play some tough games. They had to play at Oregon. They lost that one 31-10. So that is undoubtedly part of why their numbers look the way that they do. They've beaten every team that they should beat. They beat Florida Atlantic. They beat Maryland. They beat Prairie View. They lost to Boston College, who's a decently good team out east, right? They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Oregon, 2 games that they should definitely lose. They beat Iowa, which is kind of surprising. They scored 32 against Iowa, that's a lot to put up against a good Iowa defense. And then they lost to Michigan 24-17. Now they get ready for good old Indiana. And like I said, Indiana should absolutely roll. This game shouldn't be close, but this is why we like college football. This is why we like it. Okay, because anything can happen on any given Saturday. And that's also the beauty of the NFL, right? Anybody can win any week. These guys are all professionals. I expect the Colts to get rolled by the Vikings, thinking that they, lose by double digits. So they are not the Colts. The Colts are not going to be my Kirk Cousins bet of the week. Love doing the Kirk Cousins bet of the week. It is quickly becoming my favorite segment. If you're new to the show, and you're probably like, Jonathan, what is the Kirk Cousins bet of the week? So a couple weeks ago, Kirk Cousins dropped an incredible quote in his press conference where he said that, you have to walk into someone else's trap and take over their trap. And from that moment forward, the Kirk Cousins bet of the week was born. And essentially every week for the Kirk Cousins bet of the week, we take a road team. We take a road underdog on the money line to win outright. So this is this week's Kirk Cousins bet of the week. Not very many good options this week for the Kirk Cousins bet of the week.
Walk into your trap, take over your trap was the line he would say. You go into someone else's stadium and you try to assert yourself.
That was the quote there by Kirk Cousins. And once again, the choices this week were tough. If I did this segment on Thursdays, I probably would have taken Houston last night. So thankfully, I don't do this segment on Thursdays. I do it on Fridays, and I pick from all of the Sunday games and all of the Monday games. And the lines this week for road underdogs, man, they're brutal. I mean, they're tough. I almost went Patriots on the money line at the Titans because the issue is both of those teams are so bad that I don't really want to bet on either one of them. Simple is that. The Saints, they're favored. The Broncos are 8.5-point underdogs against the Ravens. I don't really want to bet against the Ravens. The Raiders are 7.5-point dogs against the Bengals. Bengals are going to score a bajillion points against the Raiders, so I didn't really like that one. The Dolphins are road underdogs against the Bills, but the Dolphins haven't won in Buffalo since 2016, so I didn't really want to take that one either. The Cowboys are 3-point underdogs to the Falcons, and I was like, I think Bijan Robinson's going to run for 200 yards in that game, so probably not going to touch that one either. And so as I continued to kind of work through, I didn't like any of them, but there's one that is intriguing, and this is the official Kirk Cousins bet of the week. We're taking the Bears on the money line against the Arizona Cardinals. We've seen Caleb Williams have success against the lesser defenses in the NFL, especially teams that don't generate a ton of pressure on the quarterback. The Cardinals are last in pass rush win rate this year in the NFL. They do not get after the passer at all. And because of that, the Cardinals are 26th this year in passing yards allowed. Caleb Williams should have a decent game because this Cardinals pass defense just isn't very good. Okay, I expect him to bounce back in a big way. I know last week the Bears lost, and the loss was weird, but in reality, Caleb Williams really led 2 game-winning drives late. On one of them, the Bears decided to give an offensive lineman the ball, and he fumbled it. What a surprise. And then later, Caleb Williams led them down the field, and that time they didn't give it to an offensive lineman, and everyone thought the Bears were going to win. And then Jane Daniels was like, no, I'm going to throw a Hail Mary, and we're going to win. And then everyone went crazy. So I not only expect for Caleb Williams to play well this week, he's clearly gotten better, and this Cardinals defense isn't that good. The other thing is I expect for the Bears coaches to coach the best game of the year, their best game of the year. Because like players have been in the media publicly like questioning their coaches. And, like, oh, what's his name? DJ Moore was talking about how he couldn't believe that they gave the ball to an offensive lineman when they were losing. Guys critiquing Tyreek Stevenson, critiquing the coaches for allowing that to really happen. Like, there's just been a lot of fire at the Bears and Matt Eberflus and the rest of that coaching staff. And look, like, those guys aren't dumb. They know that if they lose the locker room, then like they're going to be in trouble. Like, there's just no way around it. And so I fully expect for this Bears coaching staff to be as prepared as they've been the entire year. The other thing is, like, this Bears defense is still really good. It's one of the best in the NFL. They slowed the Washington Commanders down a ton, which, the Commanders were absolutely rolling coming into that game. Now they're playing against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, another decently good offense. There are weeks where it's like, yeah, I forgot, Kyler Murray undoubtedly deserved to be the number 1 overall pick. And then there are other weeks where it's like, oh, why was Kyler Murray the number 1 overall pick? He's kind of small, and I feel like the wind knocked him over right there. So we'll see kind of what version of Kyler the Cardinals get, but I like the Bears on the road, on the money line. That is this week's official Kirk Cousins bet of the week. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Penn State, Ohio State, that is the headline college football game of the weekend. I've got a Funless Friday, and I'll recap my Colts and Indiana predictions, all that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice day. No Zack Gray today, sadly. It's a bummer. Ohio State fan. I really wanted his thoughts on Ohio State, Penn State. Also wanted the bets that he has because the dude's just been on fire here lately. So bummer. Anyway, Colts are going to lose on Sunday Night Football in front of the entire country, probably by double digits. That's kind of my prediction. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. And I just don't think that Joe Flacco is going to have the mobility to navigate this high blitzing, high pressure rate Vikings defense, a team that's blitzed on 41% of its opponents' dropbacks this year. Like, that's just, I don't know. It just seems like a bad matchup for the Indianapolis Colts. This is also the best offense that this defense has seen all year. And as we all know, this defense is questionable, to put it nicely. Indiana should roll Michigan State tomorrow. That game shouldn't even be close. Okay. Rourke, he's set to play. He's set to play quarterback, which as soon as you hear that, it's like, go bet them -7.5, go bet them -8 or -8.5 even. Like, go and bet them because they should win that game by double digits. A little concerned that it's on the road, but with, a 6-year senior quarterback, they should be fine. The big game of tomorrow, Penn State on the road against 4th-ranked Ohio State. And I'm telling you right now, I'm taking Ohio State to win this football game, even though it's in Happy Valley. Everything I'm hearing from a breakdown perspective is saying to take Penn State. Ohio State, doesn't know what they're doing at left tackle. They played their 3rd-string left tackle last week. That's part of why they struggled against Nebraska. They're moving, it seems like, an offensive guard to play left tackle. Like, that's not a great feeling. Penn State should have an advantage there because, look, I'm not a Penn State guy. I think they come up short every year. But this defense this year for Penn State is really good. No way around it. You say, well, Jonathan, are you taking Ohio State because Drew Aller got hurt and he's a game-time decision? No, because in a lot of ways, Bo Pribula, I want to make sure I say his name right, the backup quarterback at Penn State, he came in against Wisconsin and was really good. Okay, he was. 11 of 13, 98 yards, a touchdown, no picks. He's also way more mobile than Drew Aller is, which is obviously an advantage for Penn State, right? Like, that's just an extra thing Ohio State has to get ready for if Pribula plays instead of Drew Aller. So, and the other thing is Ohio State likes to play man-to-man, and it's not fun to do that, or it's harder to do that when you're playing against a running quarterback, and that's exactly what Pribula is, whereas Drew Aller's a little more stand in the pocket, kind of more Jared Goff-ish, where, like, if he needs to run and pick up 7, he can, but he wants to stay in the pocket and he wants to throw the football. Pribula, not the same guy. Like, wants to get outside the pocket, wants to run, can make things happen with his legs. And when you're playing man-to-man and the defense's back is to you and everyone's 15 yards down the field, like, you can take off and go. So Pribula could be, a bigger issue than Drew Aller, but I don't really care. I'm taking Ohio State to win. Part of it is because Will Howard is from Pennsylvania. Will Howard's the starting quarterback for Ohio State. He wanted to play at Penn State. Penn State never offered him, so I expect Will Howard to play incredibly well. The real reason, though, is just because Penn State doesn't beat Ohio State, and, like, history and these things matter. Penn State is always overrated. They just are. They never beat Ohio State. When Michigan's good, they never beat Michigan. James Franklin's 1-12 against top 5 opponents. He's won the Big Ten only once during his time at Penn State, but it's more than that, though. It's more than just like a James Franklin thing. Like, Ohio State just has a pedigree that Penn State does not, and that matters. And Ohio State really expects to win this game while Penn State hopes and thinks that they can win this game. Like, there is a difference in that kind of gives Ohio State a bit of an edge. Like, I remember growing up, I couldn't beat my dad in anything, and it's, really frustrating. And he's going to be here, I think, sometime next week, and we're going to play some pickleball, and I'm going to beat him really badly because I'm not a kid anymore. But I remember growing up, he beat me in everything. We played one-on-one in the front yard or in the driveway just all the time. And when I was in probably like 6th grade, I felt like I was better than he was. I played a lot before school, after school, shot like every day, played at the Y on the weekends, just played all the time. But I couldn't beat him in one-on-one, and it was really frustrating. And every time, when I was in sixth grade, every time I came close, he would remind me that I'd never beaten him before. It'd be, like we play to 11 and it'd be like 9-6 or whatever. And he'd be like, Jonathan, you never beaten me before. And then, I'd start thinking and trying too hard and all those things. And I'd end up losing. And I just think that the same thing happens to Penn State this weekend, right? It's close late. Penn State's up by like 4. There's like 3 minutes left. And everyone on the Penn State sidelines like getting excited, like, ooh, is this going to be the first time in 7 years that we actually beat Ohio State? Like, is this actually going to happen? Meanwhile, Ohio State's going to be on the other sideline like, we're going to beat y'all because that's just what we do. That's just what Ohio State does. They just tend to beat Penn State every single year, right? And, that feeds more into the idea that Penn State's always overrated. With that being said, this is probably one of the better teams James Franklin has had. Okay, the offense looks much better than it did last year. They're a little more athletic at wide receiver. So, if Penn State won, would I be surprised? Not really. I just kind of expect for Ohio State in that pedigree that they have to be why they win this game. And this game's bigger beyond. It's number 3 against number 4. It's bigger beyond. It's Ohio State and Penn State. It's bigger in part because like a spot in the Big Ten title game is going to be impacted by this. If Penn State beats Ohio State is out of the running. They are not going to make the Big Ten title game because Oregon's undefeated, Indiana's undefeated, and obviously Penn State would remain undefeated. So it would look like Ohio State wasn't going to make the Big Ten title game anymore. Indiana fans, you're rooting for Ohio State because Indiana doesn't play Penn State this year. If Ohio State beats Penn State and then Indiana then beats Ohio State, obviously they stay undefeated, but they also have, they also have the tiebreaker if, Indiana was to lose later of common opponent record, right? Indiana would beat Penn State in that regard if they beat Ohio State and Penn State lost to them. So that's why that's important. The other thing is if Ohio State wins and they beat Penn State and then Indiana loses to Ohio State, they're all still sitting at 1 loss. I don't know how the tiebreaker kind of works from there. So if you're an Indiana fan, though, you want Ohio State to win because it just strengthens the chances of Indiana making the Big Ten title game. The other reason why it's a big deal is because both of these coaches have upset fan bases, which is kind of ridiculous. And, like for Penn State, this kind of feels like the year where they figure it out and they beat Ohio State and they get over the hump. And so if they lose this game, people are not going to be happy with James Franklin, who will then be 1-13 against top 5 opponents and will have lost to Ohio State 8 years in a row. So that'll be problematic for James Franklin. And for Ohio State, they just continue to look for any reason to be upset about Ryan Day. Okay, he's another guy who struggled in big games as well. If he loses to Penn State, that Ohio State fan base is going to go crazy. And they should, right? Because that Ohio State fan base has incredibly high standards. Okay, and that is a good thing. I don't expect some Colts fans to understand that because a lot of Colts fans are like, hey, let's go 9-8 and barely make the playoffs. Let's do that. That's a good year. So, but, that's just not how it is in Columbus. Those guys expect undefeated seasons. You beat everybody and you'll win national titles. That's the expectation in Columbus. Ryan Day hasn't lived up to that. And if they lose their second game of the year this year, it's going to be really hard for him to even make the college football playoff. So, very intrigued. Can't wait for that game. That game is at noon tomorrow. All right. Funless Friday, and then we'll probably wrap it up and get up out of here. Pacers play tonight. The Dan Dockett Show follows me here in about 12 minutes from noon to 3 in honor of Penn State's inability to always come up short and never live up to expectations. My Funless Friday today is teams that just never live up to the hype. So obviously we have Penn State on here. They never beat Michigan. They never beat Ohio State. They've won the Big Ten once during the time that James Franklin has been there. They just don't live up to the hype. Notre Dame, same thing, right? What does Notre Dame do every year? This year might be different, right? They got a solid team. They beat A&M on the road. They did lose to Northern Illinois, but we can ignore that. But for the most part, Notre Dame for the last decade has been a team that beats a bunch of bad ones. And then in their bowl game or in the infamous 2012 national championship game, they get their doors blown off. That's just who they've been for the past, 10, 15 years. The Jets fall into the same category. They haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. People talk about them all the time, and they just never meet the expectations. They haven't met them this year. They're 3-6 right now. Doesn't seem like they're going to meet them. It seems like they're going to miss the playoffs for the 14th straight year. The Cowboys, same boat. Don't really think I have to explain this one. Like, they don't win in the playoffs. And even when their teams are good, even when expectations are high, they just don't win. Dak Prescott's 2-5 in the playoffs. Tony Romo, if I remember correctly, never won a playoff game, right? I mean, winning walked out the door when Jimmy Johnson left. The Dolphins, they're on this list as well. Under Mike McDaniel, all they've done is lose in the first round and lose in December and January. When Dan Marino was there, they couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't win the Super Bowl. They just consistently fell short of the expectations that teams had for them. In the NBA, the Knicks haven't won a title since 1973. Despite having high expectations through the 90s with Patrick Ewing, they only made the NBA Finals once. That was in the shortened season, and they lost in 5 games to the Rockets, right? And then fast forward, 20 years later, you got the Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire era. They had expectations, but they couldn't get it done. Couldn't even make an Eastern Conference Finals. They haven't made an Eastern Conference Finals since 2000. They had expectations last year, and guess what? They didn't live up to them. Shout out to our Indiana Pacers for keeping that streak alive. The Philadelphia 76ers, Joel Embiid, he's in year 8, and the 76ers haven't made a conference finals. This is a team that never meets expectations. At least they haven't for the last 8 years. And, I mean, look, when Allen Iverson was there, one of the best one-on-one scorers we've ever seen, they made the NBA Finals once. And that was really it. So, Philadelphia Sixers, they just don't seem to live up to expectations either. The Clippers belong on this list, the Lob City era. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and those guys couldn't beat the Warriors. Then you got the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era. They made it to the Western Conference Finals once. That was it. They consistently came up short. And then you got the Yankees. They haven't met expectations since 2009. When they had a chance to do it this year, they lost in 5 games to the Dodgers in the World Series. So, and they got, just absolutely blown off the field. And then finally, last team on my fun list Friday, teams that fail to meet expectations, teams that fail to live up to the hype. This wouldn't be a list without Kentucky basketball on it, right? Haven't won a national title since 2012, if I remember correctly. Haven't made a Sweet 16 in 5 years, right? 5 straight years of first weekend exits. Isn't living up to the hype if you're the head basketball coach in Lexington. I almost put Indiana on here, but they don't even have big national expectations anymore. So I decided to leave them off of the list. The Dan Dockett Show is on today from noon to 3. Colts play the Vikings Sunday Night Football. Twitter's going to be a lovely place that night. It's going to be absolutely wild. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. If you see me tweet something at __ Jonathan Smith, take it as sarcasm because that's probably what it's going to be. So I don't know. I got people here in the YouTube chat, Indie Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe, telling me I'm being too hard on Flacco, telling me how great Joe Flacco is, even though he's 39 years old. He's been a backup quarterback in the NFL for the last 5 years. The Colts were the only team that offered him a contract in the offseason, but somehow, some way, Joe Flacco's amazing, and he's going to lead the Colts to the Super Bowl this year. That's apparently what's going to happen if you listen to my YouTube chat. Joe Flacco's the second coming of Jesus, apparently. And that's just not the case. Okay. Joe Flacco is fine. He's a solid NFL quarterback. That's it. Who is very prone to turning over the football. If you watched him in Cleveland last year, that was the case. He had stretches like that when he was in Baltimore. There's a reason why his career touchdown to interception ratio is less than 2-1. It's 1.5-1. Okay. So look, you can go out there, you believe in Joe Flacco. I hope he plays well. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he throws for 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on Sunday night. I just don't see it happening. This Vikings team is clearly better than the Colts. They're more talented. They're better coached. They're just better. There's no way around it. They're going to heat the Colts up all night. Joe Flacco's going to struggle because he just doesn't have the mobility to escape pressure. And this Colts offensive line just isn't good enough to give him time to really throw the football. On top of it, the run game when Joe Flacco's been the quarterback hasn't been as good. It hasn't been as good. And so, like, if you can't run the ball and you don't give your quarterback time to throw, which I think are going to be both of the issues on Sunday, I just don't know how this Colts team wins. And defensively, this is the best offense the Colts have seen all year. And let's be honest, we don't think this Colts defense is very good. There's simply no way around it. The Colts are going to lose on Sunday night. They're going to fall to 4-5, and Monday's going to be a lot of fun. Either way, no matter what happens, Monday's going to be a lot of fun. I'm either going to eat crow and be like, oh, okay, you guys were right. Joe Flacco's amazing. Or I'm going to be right, and that's going to be even more fun. So make sure you tune back in on Monday from 10 to noon. We make big predictions here. Okay, like that's what we do on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. And if I'm wrong, I've got a segment on Mondays where I tell you that I was wrong. So you're going to want to hear that. Monday's going to be an absolute blast. But so is the Dan Dockett Show. The Dan Dockett Show is live today, noon to 3, right here on Indy Sports Ticket. Download the app. Listen to it on 14:30 a.m. It's going to be a great show. Thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you again Monday from 10 to noon. I hope you have a great weekend. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully the Colts win, and go ahead and bet that IU game with IU, covering that 7.5 point spread. I will talk to you on Monday at 10 a.m.